I'm very pleased that y'all joined us today. We're just a week away from Christmas. It's hard to believe. And we're very appropriately talking about the mall in Spotsylvania County and all the other exciting things that are going on in the county. But before we get started, I would love to introduce our sponsor today. Before we introduce our speakers, Jennifer Sloat, and I think she maybe has another team member on too, from K. Hovnanian Homes. Are a affiliate marketing partner at FAAR and have been great sponsors this year. You probably have seen them on many of our calls. So Jennifer, let's kick it over to you.
Thank you so much, Kim. I wanted to tell everybody first, happy holidays from K. Hovnanian Homes. We certainly hope you guys are finding a way to connect and stay safe and warm during this holiday season. So thank you guys so much for letting us join as a lifetime Fredericksburg resident. There's a lot of topics on this that are very important. And as a Spotsylvania County resident, I'm super excited to hear about the apartments coming to the mall. I can remember being there as a kid and seeing that drop ceiling. And so it's really kind of cool to see how our town has evolved, how we're doing really controlled growth. And at the same time, Spotsylvania County is becoming one of the more affordable options to live and still be within a great distance. So we're super proud. We want to invite you all out to our Spotsylvania County communities. Right now, we do have a Estates of Chancellorsville, which does have 2 homes for sale that are ready to go. One of them is actually the model. It is just breathtakingly gorgeous. If you haven't seen it, definitely go see it. It'll just knock your socks off. And then there you have another community home in there in Estates of Chancellorsville and Spotsylvania County as well. Blue Ribbon Schools, just a great area, great community to live in. And we certainly warmly welcome our broker partners. I hope you guys enjoy this economic update. I know I'm excited to hear about these apartments. Matter of fact, I might want to live in one. Super exciting. Talk to you guys. Happy holidays.
Thank you, Jennifer. Always good to have you on. Before I kick it over to our speakers, I just want to do some housekeeping. We want this to be interactive and certainly get your questions answered. So if you do have questions or comments, feel free to unmute, raise a hand, pop it in the chat. We'll make sure that we get to you. And I'd like to thank our speakers today. We have Debbie Sanders with Spotsylvania County Economic Development. Debbie was instrumental in making this happen. I didn't do any of the hard work in securing Mr. Cafaro. She did it all for us. So with that, I will turn it over to Debbie for an overview of what exciting things are happening in Spotsylvania County. So Debbie, all yours. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you to the association for inviting Spotsylvania Economic Development back to share an update since we last met in August. Also, on behalf of the county, I would like to extend our appreciation to Mr. Cafaro for joining the meeting today. It has been about 9 months from the onset of the health crisis, and many businesses are still struggling to survive, trying to reduce cost and adjust business operations accordingly. The ongoing economic adjustment, although unprecedented, has afforded the county and the region opportunities to promote well-positioned industrial available sites and buildings as a desirable place to do business outside of the suburban markets. We are fortunate to be in one of the most well-positioned regions in the country. As we close out this unforgettable year, the county has remained a strong competitor in our economic development efforts. We continue to outperform prior years in business locations and capital investments as we strive for a healthy and viable business and residential community. We continue to work with companies seeking logistical growth opportunities in the county. Investors have not stopped looking for locations to best position companies to serve the needs of the market. And this holds true for redevelopment projects on a local and national level, such as the redevelopment plans for our town center that will create a momentum to attract new businesses and jobs, as they have continued to do for 40 years. And we commend the tireless efforts the mall has shown to our community. That includes the beautiful village. And just a brief reflection, 9 months ago, we visited the mall after our stores had darkened. The mall doors remained open, and although the corridor lights were dimmed, the music still played. The mall stood ready to serve our community as we moved through the uncertain months. So the county, during that past time, just this year has welcomed over 200 new businesses this year. And the department has prepared nearly 80 requests for proposals to prospective companies in search for available sites and buildings, both industrial, commercial, and retail. And just a few examples of some of our new business locations and opportunities. We recently were awarded the Veterans Administration's outpatient clinic, the largest in the US. It opens in 2023. They start construction in the first quarter of next year, bringing a minimal of 600 jobs to the community. We have continued development with S-Power, the largest solar farm in the US. We have just celebrated the third expansion for Kaiser Compressors, the US headquarters, an additional 30,000 square feet and 100+ jobs being added to that corporation. We recently landed Millcraft Manufacturing, a component of Next Day Cabinets, who purchased the former AKA building, a 58,000 square foot building, adding an extra 25+ jobs to the community. The Spotsylvania Regional Medical Center freestanding emergency room will be located on Route 3. They will be about 11,000 square feet and adding an additional 30 new jobs to our health community. And also in our tourism sector, Dominion Raceway is doing construction of a garage condominium called Dominion Lux. And that will be built in 4 stages and adding about 250,000 square feet. So that's just a brief overview of our activities, and I'll turn it back over to you, Kim.
All right. Well, I know that we're going to have some questions about the county as a whole as we get to talking, but I'd love to kick it over to Mr. Cafaro to talk about, where we're at with the town center right now, what maybe has changed since the start of the pandemic, and then where you all see it going. And then we already have a question in the chats, but I'll let you start and give an overview first.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Great. Well, first of all, thank you for allowing me to speak to your organization today. And I want to thank Debbie for contacting me, and also Spotsylvania County. It's wonderful when I get an opportunity to speak to community members, and we're hearing about all the positive things. Certainly in 2020, when the overall story that we've been hearing elsewhere has been pretty much very negative and dour in terms of the economy. We're very bullish about the Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania region. And that's one of the reasons why my family has continued to reinvest for 40 years. I'm the 3rd generation ownership of our family business. We have properties in 10 states, which includes 12 regional malls, such as Spotsylvania Town Center. So it's a project that, quite frankly, we've known for many, many years that the evolution of shopping centers is an ongoing situation. And the shopping center that my grandfather developed in the 80s is not necessarily the model that fits today. And that's why we've continued to attempt to evolve the shopping center into something more than that. It's been over a decade now since we broke ground on the Village Edition. It's hard to believe. And we had a lot of plans on what that village would evolve into. Some of those plans materialized, others did not, quite frankly. And we see this opportunity with what we're calling the Aura at Spotsylvania, which is going to be, make sure I get these numbers right, 271 multifamily apartments. So we are in the process, and we have been for quite some time, working with the county officials, with county planning. I was recently in town and participated in a presentation to the Spotsylvania County Planning Board and we were successful in getting the passage on a 4-3 vote. So it was close, but successful in getting to the next level. In mid-January, our redevelopment will go in front of the Board of Supervisors, and we are hopeful that they will approve so that we can continue with groundbreaking sometime in the spring, and potentially to have the apartments open and accepting residents by sometime in 22. So it's been a project that began actually in the city of Fredericksburg. You're probably all familiar with the land that sits right adjacent to Route 3, where there was a Ramada Hotel, a Best Western, and some others. And over the years, our firm has acquired those properties. We initially were meeting with the city of Fredericksburg and spent quite some time speaking with them about how we could develop that in a mixed use way. Frankly, it was a little challenging to take the shape of a kidney-shaped property and try to develop it in a grid format to resemble, downtown Fredericksburg streetscape. And then the opportunity was presented to us with the bankruptcy of Sears to take portions of what we envisioned in the city and to bring it to the county property and to really make it an adjunct part of the mall itself. As we have analyzed and we have experienced in our industry, there is a surplus of retail and particularly department stores in most regional malls, certainly ones that were constructed in the 80s and 90s. And there is no longer a need for multiple department stores of the type that Sears was. And matter of fact, Sears obviously is an obsolete concept these days. And to take retail space and convert it to the highest and best use is really what our goal has been, and will continue to be going forward. And we see the development of these apartments, which are intended to be at the top end of the marketplace. The pricing of most of these units, we're talking a majority of them are 1 and 2 bedroom at $1,200 to $1,300, I think, is where we had said we were starting off. I mean, obviously the market is going to be dictating what the pricing ultimately will be. But again, it's designed to be at the top end of the marketplace. We were a bit surprised at some of the resistance folks in the community, but we are also understanding the fact that traffic is an overriding concern and has been for most in our community. Anyone that has to drive Route 3 knows that. And through the traffic studies that were conducted using the methodology that's prescribed by VDOT and by the county, this development of apartments actually will result in a net decrease in traffic as compared to a 120,000 square foot retail store. So from that standpoint, we believe that it's a positive. There also are multiple proffers that are involved in this development that provides for additional monies back to the schools, back to the parks. So we're pleased to be able to help enrich the community in that way as well. And certainly the county has been very much involved in the design so that it is not only attractive, but also addresses life safety type issues, making certain that we have appropriate green areas and amenities that will be, again, complementary with the commercial development that we have in place already. So again, I don't know exactly, I didn't have the exact agenda, Kim, so I open up to questions or help you guys.
Yeah, we've got a bunch. So, I'm going to work backwards. So I apologize for doing this. Can you give us your full name and title, and where are you located? So you obviously don't live in Spotsylvania County. So
Sure.
give us
My name is Anthony Cafaro Jr. So I am the co-president of the Cafaro Company. We are based out of Niles, Ohio. It's a suburb of the Youngstown area. We're midway between Cleveland, Ohio, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My family's business, we just celebrated our 71st year in business. The company was started by my grandfather, and my brother and I now share the title of co-president, and we assumed that role from my father, who's still involved. He retired about 10, 11 years ago, but is still involved in a consulting role. And we have properties in 10 states from actually, Spotsylvania is probably the furthest to the east in Virginia, but we have properties as far west as Washington and Oregon. Our primary core is mostly through the Midwest. We are, again, family owned, and we are making decisions about reinvestment based upon the long-term play in all these marketplaces. Every shopping center that we've owned, we've built from ground up, and we hold our properties on a long-term basis.
Okay, great. Thank you. So if you don't mind, Kevin, if you are in a spot to talk, Kevin had a great, fairly long comment in there, so I'll call on him to say it out loud. So Kevin,
all righty, thank you for taking the time, sir. I appreciate it. And I want to preface my comment with, I think that the apartments are a great idea. I think it's fantastic. I think it's going to change the whole outlook of that corridor. The concern I have is with the traffic. The traffic study states that it's going to be a net decrease. But if we got 271 apartments, let's call it 2 people an apartment. Let's call it 500 cars twice a day. That's 1,000 cars a day. I've been in that Sears. Ain't no way they were getting 1,000 cars a day to that Sears. Let's even cut it in half. I don't think they were getting 500 cars a day to that Sears. So it just feels like, I think the apartments are great. I'm concerned every time I go home by it every day. And I just think, wow, how are we going to fit any more cars on this section of Route 3?
Well, Kevin, I think that's a good question. And it's actually something that came up during the Planning Commission meeting. We don't make up the rules as to how you calculate traffic counts. And one of the questions that was during our Planning Commission meeting, they said, Sears in its last couple of years wasn't doing that sort of business, and they weren't attracting cars and people. That may be true. The VDOT prescribed way of handling this, and this is fairly consistent across the country, is to ascribe on a per square foot basis for retail space. Here are the number of day trips. And I'm not a traffic engineer, so I don't quote me on all the specific methodology. But it basically prescribes a formula that you apply to retail space on a per square foot basis. And then there's a similar formula that is used for apartment housing. So when they apply these formulas, and they are broad-based, they aren't necessarily intended to be 100% accurate as to what the actual traffic counts will be at this particular development. But that is how they arrived at those figures. So that's really the only basis that we can utilize, because otherwise the VDOT or the county doesn't accept anything other than what they roll out. I will say that consider the alternative. If we had a 120,000 square foot retailer take that space that was there with Sears, and let's compare it to some of the highest use of a retail, Costco. Now, Costco generates, I'm sure, double or triple the amount that a typical 120,000 square foot space would have. Whereas Sears was on the opposite end, at least in the last decade or so. Back in its heyday, that Sears store was doing tremendous volume if you go back to the 80s and early 90s. So we could have potentially, if we were able to secure a retailer that generated traffic comparable to, let's say, a supermarket or a Costco, and those are on the higher end. And it would have for sure generated more traffic than what an apartment dwelling would do. And in that instance, we would not have to go to a planning commission or to seek approval. We could have just backfilled the space. So I don't necessarily, I can't tell you that what we have done or will be doing with the apartment is going to substantially make things better or worse. With traffic, we all know in the region, traffic is a problem. Through the years, we have attempted to be part of the solution by the multiple changes that we were proffered to do, and we did complete when the village came in, including the internal traffic circles, which during this project, by the way, will be improved with some different directional and striping to make them work better. The roadway that actually came in off of Route 3, the main mall entrance, was about $1.2 million alone just to make that work better. I am aware that there is currently going to be, they're in talks now to add an additional, or I guess make the turning lane a continuous through lane on that portion of Route 3. I think that's scheduled to occur sometime in 2021. As many of you might be aware, when the village was proffered back in 2008-ish, we were told to design and fund and construct what was going to be called the Harrison Road Connector, which would have been the north-south connector between Route 3 and Harrison Road, the next overpass. And we have now a $3 million set of plans that's a nice paperweight. And we were prepared to proceed with that project if not for some of the litigation that happened outside of our community, case elsewhere in Virginia. So traffic is a concern for everyone, for businesses like us, and certainly for the community, everyone that lives there. We don't want to exacerbate that problem. We think that best case scenario, or I guess worst case scenario, it's a neutral situation in terms of traffic.
All right. Hey, I appreciate you answering that. Thank you very much.
So to go along with what we just talked about, we had a question of, you brought up an interesting idea. Will your company seek any higher end grocery stores to go along with the apartment complex? We would love a Trader Joe's if you could make that happen, but something like Harris Teeter Whole Foods. Is there any thought about that in the long term?
Yeah, absolutely. That actually came up during our planning commission presentation as well. I mentioned during that meeting that it was our intent to seek out, a higher quality grocer, and I actually used the name Whole Foods or Trader Joe's. Today, there is not a direct location, or ready location for either of those that they would find acceptable. We actually had some recent discussions and with Whole Foods, and we're not yet on the radar, but those types of discussions are ongoing, and they can change very rapidly. There are other, like I was mentioning before, department stores. We have JCPenney, we have Macy's, we have Belk. If I were sitting here a couple years from now, I would be surprised to say that we're going to have Macy's, JCPenney, and Belk. There's some of those locations, such as, not that to say that Belk is not going to be around anytime soon. I have no indication that they're going to leave. But for example, if Belk were to decide to exit the market, that location would be ideal to split up into multiple uses, one of which could be a grocer. They're going to want parking, they're going to want high visibility, and a site like that could be amenable to that. So yes, down the road, we feel that there's opportunities. Thus far, we've been told by the two that you have named that the market does not yet support it. It could also be an indication that Wegmans does such a good job as a grocer, and they are outstanding, in my opinion, probably the best in the country at what they do. They may also be part of the reason why we haven't seen some of the niche grocers, because they do such a good job themselves.
So I know you said you're talking about the presentation for the Planning Commission, but the Planning Commission's decision is not binding. So you still have to go before the board. Do you have any sense on where the board is about this? I know that if you've driven around Spotsylvania County in the last few years, I mean, there are an incredible number of apartments being built all over the county, certainly not on this corridor necessarily in this area. But I'm shocked every time I drive down Route 1 past Cosmers Corner and out towards Lake Anna. There is a lot of capacity in the apartment market around here, it seems like. So what are your thoughts, A, about going before the Board of Supervisors, and then B, the ability of the market to absorb a significant number of apartments?
Well, Debbie mentioned that all the new businesses that are coming into the community, including the Veterans facility, an Exit South. So we see that growth continuing. And, I would say in January, when we have the supervisors meeting, we are very hopeful that they will be supportive of this. I think this development is very unique and distinct from many of the other developments that have occurred to date and are planned in the future for apartment housing throughout the region. And that being, we are not pitching that, hey, we're going to be building commercial as a multi-use to generate future revenue. We have the commercial base. This is intended to stabilize and to grow the commercial revenue, the tax base that we already have. Spotsylvania County has benefited greatly for 30, 40 years based upon the revenues that have been generated through Spotsylvania Town Center, Spotsylvania Mall. So we want to make sure that those revenue sources continue for years and decades to come. We cannot be the same sole shopping center. Everybody goes to the mall just to shop. That model has evolved, and if we don't evolve with what's going on throughout the industry, number one, the retailers, the restaurants, the ones that will remain, they're going to see our model as outdated. They are not going to stay in our community. They're not going to stay in Spotsylvania County. They will go elsewhere, whether that is elsewhere down the street, elsewhere to other communities outside the region. So it's important that we continue to adapt. The housing component is still going to be a very small portion of the overall development. We're talking about 4 acres of a site that is 100 and some acres. So again, a small component, but an important component to continue to diversify what it is that Spotsylvania Town Center will be going forward.
I don't want to keep dominating. I know there's other questions. So anybody want Clay?
Yeah, quick question. With the recent housing study that the GWRC put out, since the first one they did since 2008, really identifying a huge lack of housing affordability. Did you consider a affordable housing component to this? It would be very conducive to public transportation with buses and everything, and it might even help your case with the Board of Supervisors if there was some type of percentage to address some of those more in need.
Obviously the affordability is a concern for Spotsylvania and Fredericksburg region and throughout the DC area. We took the direction from the supervisors and others within Spotsylvania County as to what they would like to see this center and this type of housing and in what way it would be developed. Affordability was discussed, but was not a priority.
So maybe that's a follow-up question for Debbie, if it's something you can comment on. Is there, as part of an economic development plan, looking ahead at these kinds of redevelopment projects, is there an interest or any sort of incentive program that you all work with to maybe look at some more of these mixed use developments where you would have a greater variety of price points? I know Kathy Belcher, though, did say that she did not think that 1,200 was high end in her opinion. I'd love to hear her expand on that if she wants to after. But Debbie, is that something that y'all talk about?
That is not something that we are usually included in at the start. You know, we don't hear about the apartment complexes being built usually. They're usually working directly with their engineers and the planning department before we even know that they're coming in, but we don't have any type of initiative for affordable housing at this point. Although when we do have opportunity, we do talk about it with prospective companies. And I think that another way to look at the affordability for this project or some other projects also that are coming in is that our business environment is changing. We're teleworking more. We are not commuting as much now. And I think that what Mr. Cafaro is doing at the mall and also, again, nationally, it affords the community to keep our workers in the area to help support our business base. I do know that as far as affordability and income levels, you know, all of that plays into it. But in Fairfax County, for example, a 1-bedroom apartment is $1,800 on the average. So taking that into perspective, I think that these price points may be right on because most people that would be living there maybe would be commuters. They're right there at 95. And again, they would be probably in the area most of the time from this point forward. But I'm sorry, I don't have more to share of our involvement. So I'll turn it over to Sherry.
So any other questions before I ask Chip? Go ahead.
I know that retail is evolving, for lack of a better word, but do you have any insight on why, like Macy's, we had a very successful Hex, Macy's was good for a while. Macy's has now turned our Macy's into a Kmart. It's nothing like it used to be whatsoever. If you go, I was down at Richmond and Regency at Short Pump, and obviously they're different markets, but Macy's is awesome down there. Here, it's like a clearance rack everywhere with tape holding carpet together. And why? What is that? And Belk looks like they're in a going out of business sale right now. If you go in there, they're half their shelves are empty. But I kind of see the writing on the wall with Belk. But Macy's, is there a decision why they're just kind of lowering the standards at that store?
You know, it's a question, Chip, that we ask ourselves and we ask retailers like Macy's all the time. You know, we walk into these stores and you're right, from one store to the next, the merchandising strategy can be totally different.
Yeah.
Macy's,
I can't even shop at this Macy's anymore.
Yeah, you know, really? Macy's, we would always assume, because Macy's actually owns that building. They don't lease it from us. They actually own that parcel in that building. And because of that, we assume that the ones they own, they would be more willing to invest in. They'd be more willing to keep it top of the line. Believe it or not, that was in our portfolio at the time. Probably we had 7, 8 Macy's, and they invested in, or they called an investment in incorporating their newest concept called Backstage. And Backstage is their attempt at off price to compete with TJ Maxx, Ross Dress for Less, and those sorts of retailers. So when you walk into that store and you see, quote, the Kmart type of assortment, that actually is their national strategy to incorporate more of that, you know, Backstage, off price, TJ Maxx mimicking concept, rather than what we had seen in the past. You know, take the shoe departments, for example. Macy's is rolling out wherever and whenever they can, putting their shoes for self-serve instead of the prior way of doing it, the traditional way that we all grew up with, where you have somebody that waits on you, they full service shoes, they go to the back, they bring you the shoes, they fit the shoes for you. That's actually at the front end of what Macy's wants to do. The stores that haven't done that yet are actually considered stores where they don't feel that there's as much of a future. So we still feel that Macy's is committed to this location. But I can't say that I necessarily have bought into their strategy. Belk is another story. You know, they invested several millions of dollars a few years back to remodel that store. I think physically the store, you know, looks fairly nice. They did some nice finishes in the store. And then Belk, which, you know, 130-year family-owned business, sold in 2016 or 2017 to a private equity. The Belk family, who'd owned that business out of Charlotte, North Carolina for, you know, decades upon decades and generations, sold out to private equity, and private equity bought it, and they're not running it the same way the family did. And you, on top of that, you put a lot of the challenges as you walk into any of the stores, and particularly the department stores. When COVID hit, these retailers had all this winter merchandise still in their stores that they couldn't move. And then they were forced to close most of their locations in March, didn't reopen them in time. A lot of this merchandise has been ordered multiple seasons in advance, sometimes a year in advance. So you now had a ton of merchandise that when the stores reopened, that was a season or two out of sync. They weren't sure when they were going to ever reopen. And when they did reopen, they sometimes didn't have enough product because they had to cut back on what they were going to order because they didn't get the ability to turn the merchandise. So it's, as you shop today in most retailers, what you're going to see is probably not what you want to see, just because the pandemic has wreaked havoc on the supply chain. It's wreaked havoc on just the ability to even get products out of China. You know, like it or not, a lot of the products are coming from overseas. And with the constraints on trade right now and shipping, it's been a problem. So my concern as being, you know, owner of a shopping center is that, are we still going to be relevant? And are the retailers that we have going to be providing the right quantities and quality of merchandise? And I think if you walk into most retail, brick and mortar retail stores today, the answer is no. It's not what we need and what we want. Hopefully when there's some normalcy and we return to a regular cycle of buying, it becomes a better experience for people to go out and shop again. And hopefully we didn't turn off too many people in the interim.
One other question, without naming names, are you getting any interest in the former Bravo space in the village? That's a great spot.
Yes, it's a great spot. It's unfortunate that store closed pretty much in line with their bankruptcy filing. So they filed bankruptcy nationally. And we actually are talking to the new ownership of Bravo to reopen that store, which is a distinct possibility, but is not finalized yet. We're still talking to some others as well. There's some businesses, the former Green Turtle, for example, there's an opportunity there. Hopefully we'll be able to open sometime later here in 2021. But we anticipate having both of those restaurants operating at some point in 2021.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chip.
Are you seeing a market difference between the current, I don't want to say health, but performance of the newer part of the town center versus the old? Because it does have obviously a very different feel. You can go to one and never ever step foot in the other when you're there.
You know, I would say that overall, you know, we have, you look at some of the restaurants. Now, we know we just talked about Bravo and their closure. But if you look at the other two restaurants that have been there since the inception of the village. Firebirds consistently has been a top performer, continues to do well. Obviously, the restrictions that are in place now due to COVID has impacted their ability and every restaurant's ability. Same thing with the Park Lane Tavern. Again, continued comp positive sales increases from year to year. They've done well. The businesses that have not done as well, if you look at the village, are most of them that have closed are because of bankruptcies. Cache doesn't exist any longer. Charming Charlie's doesn't exist any longer. Again, bankruptcies, not specific to Spotsylvania Town Center, but just overall. The mall, although the enclosed mall, is the quote older portion of the development, it probably has fared better than the village, just because the apparel offerings and some of the businesses that have been in the village have been impacted by COVID more so. One segment that has done well throughout the pandemic has been athletic footwear. So if you look at retailers like Foot Locker and Finish Line, Kids Foot Locker, their sales have actually, in some instances, doubled, tripled over the course of the past 6 months. And that's nationally. Athletic footwear has done well. Businesses like Crocs, again, that's a segment that has shown tremendous growth. Dick's Sporting Goods has done very well. There are other segments of retail that have not done as well. Francesca's in some of those categories. Francesca's just filed in the past month, and we're working with them currently to try to maintain their tenancy. And likely, if Francesca stays as a going concern and doesn't totally liquidate their chain, they will still be at Spotsylvania Town Center, and that's what our hope is. But overall, I think if you look at Spotsylvania Town Center, you might want to have a quick reaction and say, wow, things are really bad here. Look at all these vacancies. I can tell you that as you walk through most malls throughout the United States, Spotsylvania Town Center is still doing much better. It's very difficult to deal with trends like, Justice, for example, is a retailer that we've had at Spotsylvania Town Center, or its sister companies owned by Ascena, Lane Bryant's and those sorts. Walk through most malls and you're going to see a half dozen empty stores from the likes of those bankrupt companies. Hopefully there'll be an opportunity to fill some of those spaces, not just with traditional apparel, but also with other types of uses that maybe are not, maybe more service oriented, more entertainment oriented. We think that the Paragon Theaters there in the village is a great addition. They just had completed right before COVID a renovation and introducing several of the luxury seating elements. And then COVID occurred, and the theater industry now is suffering probably as bad as any other segment of our industry. So we're optimistic that things will turn around, and we're very hopeful that the vaccine allows people to come back out and to socialize and to shop and to do all the things that I think all really want to do.
Yes. Okay. Amen to that. I can't wait to go back to the mall with my kids and enjoy some time without masks on and being able to meet with friends. And you can be sure that these folks on this call definitely frequent Firebirds and other places in the mall. We're excited to get back there. Any other questions? I don't want to miss anybody.
I will say Kevin and I were at Firebird yesterday and had a absolutely fabulous meal. So
Thank you.
So I had sort of a global question from a growth perspective. I know that Chip, who just spoke, was on a call once before with me and said, who thought the year of the pandemic would be when everyone wanted to buy a home. So we are seeing, significant residential growth in this area, and have been for years, as people move down 95, maybe at an accelerated pace for a while, escaping the more urban landscape of up north. Does that play into when you're looking at, I know you're already invested obviously in Spotsylvania, but do you look at that and see a growing residential area like ours as a bright spot and, you know, good for sustaining future growth at the mall or future anchor stores, or, you know, if you do have a vacancy, does that play in when you market our area that we have significant growth?
Absolutely. And it's not really so much what we think, it's what whoever we're attempting to attract to the community. It's not a situation where we sit back behind our desk and wait for the phone to ring to see if someone wants to come and lease a space at Spotsylvania Town Center. We're out actively prospecting, communicating with these retailers, restaurants, entertainment, and they want to see the data. They have their own tools. A lot of it's done on the desktop, and if they see growth, that's what they want to see. They have to walk back in front of their board and show why this location is going to be successful. If they see that there's population loss, that there's increasing unemployment, that's going to be a concern. It's going to be a negative, and we're unlikely to be able to compete against, if there's a restaurant that's only going to open up 6 new locations in the United States in 2021, there's a lot of people we're competing against, a lot of different communities and centers. So the more that we can demonstrate that there's growth in the community, that the traffic is sufficient to support their business. As much as we talked about the negativity of the traffic, and really we're talking about vehicular traffic on infrastructure that is inadequate to support it, I will tell you that there's still a lot of businesses, particularly a lot of the marquee restaurants that you see further up near the Beltway, that will not come to our community because there's insufficient daytime traffic. So while we all talk about how traffic is negative, and I agree, I've been stuck in traffic like all of you have. I don't deal with it on a daily basis like you, so I'm not as frustrated, but there's still, when it comes to daytime traffic, that's why we don't have some of those restaurants, because we don't have the lunch business to support them. We have great dinner time business, but the lunch business isn't what it is, let's say, up in the Beltway, where there's these high-rise office towers and the Amex cards with the corporate expense accounts.
So we're getting lots of love for Dillard's and for bringing Bravo back, just so you know. So does anybody have a final question? So I'm just going to do a fun one. So a year from now, where do you see us? You're obviously a high-ranking person in a very large company with tentacles all over the country. Hopefully you have some reason to be optimistic for the Christmas shopping season in 2021.
So you want me to say, where do I see Spotsylvania Town Center, or on a broad?
And then sort of the mall establishment in general.
Yeah, I think that, well, first of all, we're optimistic that in January, we're going to get the green light to be able to proceed very quickly with construction commencing for the apartment complexes. So we should be a year from now, when you're driving into the mall, you're going to see 2 larger 4-story towers that have these apartments. Not sure we have actually residents there yet, but it'll be definitely along the way. In terms of the mall itself, I will tell you that unfortunately, things might get a little bit worse before they get better. This time of the year, a lot of retailers have filed for bankruptcy already. More retailers have filed for bankruptcy, I think, in 2020 than in any other year in history, and maybe a combination of years. They've held out, some of them, through the holiday to see how it's going to be. Unfortunately, with the continued restrictions and closures, when I sat around in April and May and talked to retailers, we were all hopeful that fourth quarter, everything would be back to normal. Well, November, December, everything isn't back to normal. And I think it's going to result in a greater number of business failures. and they will end up occurring in the first and second quarter of 2021. And it does take time to find those new businesses to fill those spaces. On average, it takes us a year to fill a vacancy. So, during a COVID environment, it's much greater time frame. Some of the issues are very practical. People want to get there and see the site. Well, we had a potential site visit with a tenant that we're scheduling for January, and just got the email last night saying, we're going to hold that off till the spring because I'm afraid to travel right now based upon what's going on. The person happens to have some health issues. So that's the reality. I hope that by third, fourth quarter of 2021, there's much more optimism from businesses that are looking to expand and to grow. There's also a backdrop of the political climate and what exactly the new administration on a federal level, what that means to business and some of the tax policies that could be implemented, and what that's going to do on a national basis for growth of retail stores or restaurants or other types of businesses that we're attempting to attract. Wish I had a crystal ball. We obviously would not be continuing to reinvest and to believe in Spotsylvania Town Center and the community if we didn't think that there was a happy ending to this, and to have the business be successful and to have people continue to support Spotsylvania Town Center. So I'm optimistic, but very cautiously at this point.
Okay, I think I had two questions. One I forgot to ask. Will your apartments have any owner occupied options, or are they all rental?
They are all rental.
Okay, second question. Just got put in there. Are these bankruptcies you're talking about national bankruptcies due to COVID, or changing buying habits, or maybe a combination?
It's a combination. And I would say the other factor is these retail entities over the years have taken on a tremendous amount of debt, corporate debt. And a lot of them are owned by private equity groups. And when you have a downturn, they don't keep a rainy day fund around. A lot of these entities have been stripped of their dollars and have gone to the underlying investors. It's an unfortunate side, and you can hear some of the negative things about Wall Street, and I would say that a lot of it's true when it comes to the retail sector. When you look at Sears and their downfall over the past decade, when you look at retailers like Toys R Us, Toys R Us was a company that was a publicly held company until I think somewhere around 2006 or 7. At that time, when they went private with a private equity, they took on, I think, about $8 billion with a B of debt. And by the time they filed about maybe 2 years ago, 97% of their revenues were going to pay down debt service. So yes, those are all issues. E-commerce obviously has been a disruptor for several years. Up until COVID, e-commerce only accounted for 10% or so of retail sales nationally. Where that number ends up, it's probably going to end up somewhere in the 20 to 25% range once things maybe in 2021 kind of stabilize. That's a big deal. And the key to retailers, the brick and mortar retailers, is to figuring out how they can use their brick and mortar spaces in order to complement so that you can go online, purchase an item on your phone, and then walk into the store and have it waiting there for you, which is what some retailers have done effectively. The Best Buys of the world, Home Depots, what's in your local store and you can go pick it up. Other retailers haven't figured it out yet or haven't invested in the technology and the infrastructure to do that.
Well, Anthony, thank you. Oh, hey, Drew, I saw you looking pensive before. I forgot to call on you. Go ahead.
No, can I ask a silly question? So
Sure.
I'm from here. I grew up going to the mall, and my friends and I are always trying to figure out names of like old stores and stuff. And I've done quick Google searches and I can't find anything. Do you know anywhere that you guys post like old maps of stores throughout the time of the mall?
I got a lot of them up here, but I can probably get you some different maps. Yeah, that we have. I'm not sure that we have anything posted online of it, but you can.
Drew, is there a decade you're looking for? A year? Is this like 85, 95? What are we looking for?
It would be like the 90s and mid 2000s. Just a cool idea, maybe for the website if you guys have extra time and not trying to save the mall. But
Nostalgia, Orange
I would
Juliet,
just-
or
Yeah.
things like that.
I will, if you want to email me, anybody that wants to email me, you're welcome to. My email address is acafaro, ACAFARO @cafarocompany.com. You're welcome to email me and I can try to get you whatever information. And I think that is a neat idea though. We had a lot of people asking about history.
Well, thank you.
Cool question, Drew. Thank you. Well, Anthony, thank you so much for your time. This has been really interesting. Debbie, thank you so much for getting this meeting together and for your time as well. I'm excited about the future of Spotsylvania County. Even though I live in the city of Fredericksburg, I shop in the county all the time. And y'all are doing a great job to keep us with great restaurants, great businesses, and we will do our best to support them. So thank you all. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year to everyone. We will hopefully see you in a better and brighter 2021.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate the info.
Thank you.